I've been sitting here all morning thinking about a phone call I had yesterday with a daughter who was absolutely devastated. Her mother had passed away a few months ago after spending 2 years in a nursing home paid for by Medicaid. This daughter had lived in that house, cared for her mother, and kept everything running for a decade. But yesterday she got a letter in the mail from the state. It wasn't a condolence note. It was a bill for $240,000. The state was telling her that because Medicaid paid for her mother's care, the state now had a claim on the house to get their money back. It's a process called estate recovery, and as we move through 2026, it is becoming a nightmare for families who thought they had done everything right. We're going to spend the next 25 minutes talking about how this works, why it's getting more aggressive this year, and exactly what you can do right now, while your parents are still with you, to make sure the family home doesn't end up in the hands of the government. I think there's a huge misunderstanding about how Medicaid works. Most people know that you have to be poor to get Medicaid to pay for a nursing home. You've probably heard that you can only have $2,000 in the bank. But everyone also hears that the house is exempt. And technically that is true while your parent is alive. They can move into a nursing home, and as long as they intend to return home, even if everyone knows they never will, the state won't force them to sell the house to pay for care. But here's the part they don't put in the glossy brochures. The house is only exempt while your parent is breathing. The moment they pass away, that house turns from an exempt asset into an available asset for the state to grab. It's a bit of a legal bait and switch, and if you aren't prepared for it, it can wipe out a century of family history in a single afternoon. Let's talk about the 2026 landscape for a second. We're seeing a massive split in how different states are handling this. In California, for example, they've basically eliminated the asset test for Medicaid, which sounds like a dream. But in states like Florida, Texas, and Ohio, they are actually tightening the rules on how they recover funds. They are hiring private collection agencies to go after estates. As of May 2026, the average cost of a nursing home stay has climbed to over $11,000 a month in many parts of the country. If your parent is in a facility for 3 years, that's a $400,000 tab. If the family home is worth $400,000, the math is very simple for the state. They take the house, they sell it, and your inheritance is zero. I genuinely find it unsettling that the system encourages families to keep the house while the parent is alive, only to swoop in once the family is grieving to take the equity. The biggest hurdle for most families is the 5-year look back. I'm sure you've heard of it, but in 2026, the technology the state uses to track your money is better than it's ever been. They aren't just looking at big bank transfers anymore. They are looking at the $500 you gave your grandson for his high school graduation 3 years ago. They are looking at the informal way you paid for your mom's groceries using her debit card. Every single dollar that left your parents' account in the 60 months before they applied for Medicaid is scrutinized. If the state decides those were uncompensated transfers or gifts, they hit you with a penalty. And a Medicaid penalty doesn't mean you pay a fine. It means the state refuses to pay for the nursing home for a certain number of months. I've talked to families who are stuck in what I call the Medicaid gap. They've given away some money to the kids, they apply for Medicaid, the state says no for 6 months because of those gifts. But the family has already spent the rest of the money. So you have a senior who needs 24-hour care, a nursing home that wants $12,000 a month, and a state that says, we aren't paying. It's a crisis that tears families apart, and it usually starts with a helpful neighbor telling you to just put the house in the kids' names today. Please, if you take one thing from this, don't just sign the house over to yourself. That is a massive red flag for the state, and it's the easiest way to trigger a penalty that could last for years. So, how do you protect the house without triggering those penalties? There are a few tools we have in 2026, but you have to use them before the crisis hits. The first is something called the caregiver child exception. This is one of the most powerful and most overlooked rules in the Medicaid handbook. If you are an adult child who has lived in your parents' home for at least 2 years before they go into a nursing home, and you can prove that the care you provided allowed them to stay home longer, the state actually allows the parent to transfer the house to you without any penalty. It's a way for the government to say thank you for saving them 2 years of nursing home bills. But here's the catch. You have to have proof. I'm talking about doctor's letters, logs of the care you provided, and proof that the house was your primary residence. I see so many kids lose out on this because they didn't keep a paper trail. They did the work, but they didn't prove the work. Another tool we're seeing used more in 2026 is the caregiver contract, or a personal services agreement. Let's be real here. Most of you are doing the work of a nurse, a social worker, and a maid for free. If your parent has money in the bank and you just take it, it's a gift in the eyes of Medicaid. But if you have a formal, written contract that says, I will provide these services for this hourly rate, that money is no longer a gift. It's a payment for services rendered. It's a legal way to spend down your parents' assets while keeping the money in the family. But it has to be a real contract. You have to pay taxes on that income. You have to keep a timesheet. If you just start writing yourself checks from your mom's account in May of 2026, and she goes into a home in June, the state is going to call that fraud. I also want to talk about life estate deeds and ladybird deeds. Depending on what state you live in, these can be a lifesaver. A ladybird deed, which is common in places like Florida and Texas, allows your parent to keep control of the house while they are alive. But the moment they pass away, the house transfers to you automatically without going through probate. In many states, Medicaid can only recover money from assets that go through probate. If the house skips probate, the state can't touch it. It's a beautiful, simple solution, but it's not available everywhere. And as of 2026, some states are trying to change their laws to allow recovery even on non-probate assets. This is why you have to check your state-specific estate recovery definition every single year. What worked for your neighbor in 2024 might not work for you in 2027. What really gets me is the spousal impoverishment rules. If your dad needs a nursing home but your mom is still healthy and living at home, the state doesn't want her to end up on the street. She is allowed to keep the house and a certain amount of assets, usually around $150,000 in 2026. But once she passes away, the state still comes for that house to pay for your dad's care. I've seen widows who were terrified to spend a dime of their savings because they were worried the state would take it. You have to understand that there are protections for the community spouse, but those protections have a shelf life. I keep coming back to the idea of the emergency elder care binder. If you are helping a parent right now, you need to be the keeper of the records. You need to know exactly when every gift was made. You need to know the fair market value of the house. And you need to have a relationship with an elder law attorney who actually specializes in Medicaid. I've seen families try to use a general divorce and real estate lawyer for this, and it's a disaster. Medicaid law is so specific and it changes so fast, especially with the 2026 budget shifts, that you need someone who lives and breathes this stuff. It might cost you $3,000 for a consultation, but if it saves a $400,000 house, it's the best money you'll ever spend. There is also a new trend in 2026 that I want to warn you about. It's the Medicaid planning scams. You'll see ads online or get letters in the mail promising to hide your assets from the government for a flat fee. They usually want you to buy a specific type of annuity or move your money into a trust they control. I genuinely don't know how some of these people sleep at night. Many of these products don't actually work the way they say they do, and by the time you find out the state has rejected your application, the planner is long gone with your fee. Real Medicaid planning is done by licensed attorneys in your state, not by someone cold calling you because you just turned 65. If you're an adult child and you're feeling the weight of this today, I want you to take a deep breath. It's May 2026, and you still have time to plan if your parent isn't in a crisis yet. But you have to be proactive. Start by having that awkward conversation with your parents. I know, no one wants to talk about their own death or the nursing home. But I promise you, having that talk over coffee today is so much better than having it with a state social worker in a hospital cafeteria. Ask them, do you have a plan for the house? Do you know about the 5-year rule? Can we sit down with a specialist just to make sure the house stays in the family? Most parents want to leave something behind for their kids. They work their whole lives to pay off that mortgage. The last thing they want is for the state to sell the house to pay for a few years of mediocre care in a facility. When you frame it as protecting their legacy, it becomes a team effort rather than a scary conversation about their health. You are working together to make sure the family's hard-earned equity doesn't just evaporate into the state's general fund. I also want to mention the hardship waiver. In 2026, the government is supposed to grant a waiver for estate recovery if it would cause an undue hardship for the heirs. For example, if taking the house would make you homeless, or if the house is a working family farm. But these waivers are incredibly hard to get. The state is going to fight you every step of the way. You have to prove that you have no other place to go and that you don't have the money to pay the bill. It's a last resort, and you shouldn't build your plan around it. It's much better to avoid the recovery entirely through a ladybird deed or a caregiver child exception than it is to beg for a hardship waiver after the bill arrives. As we move through the rest of this year, here is your estate protection checklist. First, find out if your state allows ladybird deeds or transfer on death deeds. If they do, that should be your first conversation with an attorney. Second, if you are living with your parent and providing care, start keeping a daily log today. Note down when you helped them with medications, when you took them to the doctor, and how much time you spent on housework. That log is your evidence for the caregiver child exception. Third, look at any gifts made since 2021. If there are big transfers, you need to know about them now so you can plan for the potential penalty period. Fourth, check your parents' home insurance and property taxes. I've seen states move in for estate recovery because a house sat empty for 6 months after a parent went into a home and the family let the taxes fall behind. That gives the state an in to claim the property. Keep the house in good standing as if your parent was still living there. It keeps the intent to return alive in the eyes of the law, which is your biggest shield while they are still alive. I genuinely believe that the Medicaid asset trap is the single biggest threat to middle-class wealth in America today. We are a generation that is watching our parents' hard-earned equity get swallowed up by a healthcare system that is too expensive and a government that is too eager to recoup its costs. But it doesn't have to be that way for your family. The rules are there, and while they are complex, they can be navigated if you start before the clock runs out. I want to hear from you in the comments. Have you dealt with an estate recovery letter? Have you successfully used a caregiver contract or a ladybird deed? Your stories help other families realize that this isn't just a legal theory. It's a real-life situation that hits people when they are at their most vulnerable. When we share our experiences, we take the power away from the ghost of estate recovery, and we give it back to the families. Navigating the senior healthcare system in 2026 is about more than just picking a doctor or a drug plan. It's about protecting the work of a lifetime. It requires us to be more persistent than the state auditors and more informed than the insurance agents. It's a heavy lift, but I'm going to keep digging through these state codes and Medicaid manuals to make sure you have the blueprints you need to keep your family's home in the family's hands. Protect the paperwork. Verify those state-specific deed rules this month. And always ask one better question before the next decision. You are the defender of your family's legacy, and I'm so glad you spent this time with me today to get better prepared. I'll see you in the next guide.